Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. As I'm sure you're aware by now, we're working with our partners Kia UK this summer. Kia have been embedded in the world of cricket for almost 15 years. They've actively supported the rise of women's cricket since 2014 and have been the proud sponsors of Surrey County Cricket Club for the last decade. During each episode of the podcast, Kia will provide you with an opportunity to get closer to the action through their Kia's Movement That Inspires moment. These include tickets, experiences to key cricket competitions across the summer. Listen out each week to hear how you can get involved and win the opportunity of a lifetime. The Ashes are still alive. This was the week that English cricket bounced back. A third classic Ashes test in a row, this time at Headingley, and this time it goes England's way. In the women's Ashes, England become the first team to take a series off Australia in 6 years as they took the T20Is 2-1 to keep the multi-format Ashes alive going into the ODIs. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today is Ben Gardner, Joe Harman and Phil Walker. But first, let's head to Mark Butcher. Mark, we, the English cricketing public, really needed that result. There were a couple of points when Marsh was in full flow on day one, or when Australia were batting in the sun on the second evening with Robinson off the field, where it looked like it was close to being all over. Where did England win this game?
Well, Stokes is 80, obviously. Mark Wood almost sort of had the game in our hands after his spell. I mean, how good was that to watch, by the way? Just ferociously quick. I may have mentioned it on the TV, but just he's not a blunt instrument anymore. Hasn't been actually for quite some time when he's played in Test matches. Just a shame he hasn't played that many. He can be used that way, of course, but he just has so much more than that in terms of the skill, the swing, the consistency. All at his first ball was 91 miles an hour, and on that first day, he never got below that. I mean, it was absolutely awesome to watch. So you had that. Then Marsh played an absolute blinder, and we looked to be in serious trouble, didn't we? First innings until Ben did what Ben does, which was kind of you find yourself in a situation where you just think, well, that's it, everything's hopeless, and then he decides, well, not while I'm still here, it isn't. So that 80, Woody's 24 off 8 as well. Got us close, and then whenever England kind of find themselves in a position where the game is at a one-inning game, you always tend to fancy them because the record under Ben of bowling teams out for the third innings, sometimes with large deficits, and then leaving themselves with something that is chaseable. I mean, some of them have been unchaseable, but in the main, leaving themselves with something that is chaseable is just astonishing. In many ways, their performance, England's bowlers' performance in the third innings of games is better than it is in the first. And that has been a real feature of the Bazball era. As much as the batting is always the thing that gets the most headlines and is the most eye-catching, it's that performance from whatever bowling attack that Ben happens to have at his disposal in the third innings of games that has been the most startling thing. And then, of course, you get lucky, don't you? You have almost the entirety of Saturday being washed out, barring sort of like 2 hours at the back end of the day. And Australia could probably consider themselves to be pretty unfortunate. It seems as though the conditions have been against them throughout the series so far. But this time, England were able to take full toll of that and knock them over on that Saturday night, setting up the tantalising last day. But as soon as it was 250, you always fancied England to do it. You kind of fancied them to do it. It might not. You always thought it might be tricky and that there would be a twist and a turn along the way, but I thought they would win from that moment on.
I thought it was a good reminder that no matter the way you go about your cricket, you will always, as a team, produce bad shots. So there's so much criticism of England players when they get out, but Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith on that second evening, two very, very soft dismissals to Moeen Ali, and you saw actually the flip side when you go too conservative almost. Australia really let Moeen Ali get into the game, having not bowled at Lords, obviously, and then first innings didn't do that much, and in that little spell, they kind of let Moeen Ali have a role that I don't think if you flipped it round, England would have let Moeen Ali bowl as long a spell as Australia did on that day.
Yeah, I think there's two elements to that. One is Australia knowing just knowing how dangerous England are batting last, and so they weren't entirely sure about how to go about building the total that they needed on the last day. They weren't entirely sure how many that needed to be. And the other side of it being, well, they probably thought to themselves, well, Woody looked out on his feet at the end of the first innings. They're a bowler down. If we kind of grind away here, then we'll, eventually the floodgates will open and we'll end up out of sight. Of course, what ended up happening was that they kept running between the wickets was really bad. And I don't know whether this is a Usman Khawaja thing or whether it's just something that seems to have crept into the Aussie team. But they kind of, even if their intention was to kind of get England's bowlers into second, third, fourth spells or whatever it was and bat long in that third innings, they kind of just forgot that you still have to keep scoring one way or the other. And so, they were missing long singles. They were kind of, turning long twos into ones and all that kind of stuff. And in doing so, just allowed the pressure to build on them. And then, of course, Mark Wood bowls a very, very quick spell early on in that third innings, whilst Mo's bowling at the other end. And the pressure of, the hideousness of facing Wood in full flight at one end, coupled with Mo bowling uncharacteristically tight. I don't think he bowled a 4-ball in that entire 16 over spell. Whereas Mo's spells are generally littered with one of those and over. And then Marnus and Steve Smith both succumbed. The Marnus dismissal was astonishing, really, when you consider that he just got away with one down the leg side. Johnny clanging one again down the leg side. And then almost the very next ball he faces against Mo, he dongs one up in the air. Was astonishing. And then for Steve Smith to come out and do that as well. Kumar Sangakkara almost said a very bad word on commentary when the Marnus dismissal happened. So those are huge moments in the game. And Mo is justified his selection out of retirement, perhaps in those 2 dismissals. If nothing else, that goes for him for the rest of the series.
Fast forwarding to that final innings, Harry Brook was brilliant. Seeing a young man do that at the business end of an Ashes test, he just seems to have it, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, he has a sort of a simplicity of thought, I suppose, which comes of kind of not overthinking things, I guess. He just went out there and was himself, wasn't he? A couple of flirts out, sort of wafts outside the off stump, the odd ball skimming through cover. I thought Australia were bad again, sort of like tactically as well on the last day in terms of they tried to create sort of some form of pressure, but were so fearful of boundaries being given away that they couldn't hold on to, they couldn't stop England from scoring at 4s. Even before the end, even before the rush towards the finish line at the end, they were still going at 4s.
It's really interesting that if you watch the highlights on the ECB YouTube of the most pivotal partnership of the game, Brook and Woakes, there's basically nothing there because they're all just 1s and 2s.
They're just 1s, yeah. I mean, I think, but even before then, even when Brook first came in, even after they'd taken the wickets of Stokes and whatever, they just kind of didn't. They had no idea really how to go about it. Which is, I guess, is understandable. Against a team like England, who they'd seen self-destruct in the first 2 Test matches, they probably thought they would do it again. All you had to do was kind of set field back, and eventually they'll slog one down your throat, and we'll win the game. They're slightly different. They play with slightly more discipline in inverted commas when there's a target at the end of it than they do when they're trying to set a game up in either the first, second, or third innings. So. And of course, now that it just leaves you in this tantalising position where you just think, can they really do this? Can they really win 3 in a row? And if Wood stays fit, I mean, Wood will be all right for Manchester. You would think, with the gap between now and then, you'd have pretty good odds on England winning in Manchester with him in the side. And as I said before this one started, that England by hint of coincidence and by injuries and whatever, have ended up with a stronger side than the one they started with. The arguments over Johnny and, I mean, I've kind of made my point a long time ago, and it just seems to be getting worse. You're almost in a position now where you could just swap one for the other. I mean, who'd have thought who'd have thought you'd even be considering that after Bairstow's year with the bat last year? But that's a thought. It won't happen, and I don't think they should. I don't think they should either. Really, I mean, I think you've come this far. I think it stays as it is. But he's looking less and less effective with both suits now. Which was never the plan.
What do you think they should do though? That's another poor test behind the stumps. I think that's 7 missed chances across the series. England could have very easily lost the series already, and those missed chances would have been a massive part of that.
Well, I mean, you could stay with exactly the same team and just put folks in at 7 and keep, couldn't you? You wouldn't have to change anything else. And productivity wise, with bat and with gloves, he'd probably do better, wouldn't he? But that was never the consideration from the start. The consideration was that Johnny, as an all-rounder, you had to have him in the team because of his batting. Absolutely correct. I'd have had it, but I wouldn't have had him keeping wicket as well, because one absolutely affects the other. His entire career tells you that that's the case. But that's not going to change. I think if England can get away with it injuries wise, it would probably be the same side. Although Robinson for Anderson or Anderson for Robinson would be a straight swap, given all being well at Old Trafford.
Sorry, on Bairstow, are you saying that you think England will continue with giving him the gloves for the rest of the series?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't see that changing. And
then the other interesting one is I guess who bats 3. Brook did it in the first innings, and the timeline here is quite interesting. McCullum tells him he'll be back at 5 in the second, and then Moeen sort of volunteers as tribute. Brook was so good at 5, and I know you think he'll be fine higher up the order, but I think it's quite telling that a decision was made for him just one innings in to the experiment.
Yeah, I mean, and also given the run chase, I suppose they wanted to have as many guys away from the newer ball as they possibly could, who could come in and chase something down. So, but yeah, I mean, listen, I think eventually he'll be absolutely fine at number 3. The issue for him at the moment is that he's just not used to leaving any balls and batting up the order. You have to, as much as Duckett has kind of bucked that trend up until now. You have to leave the ball alone every once in a while, particularly a place like Headingley, where nicks are the main way of getting out, particularly in the first 2 innings of the game. So, but that's something that he'll learn. He's not quite there yet. Moeen apparently volunteered to bat number 3. I mean, the most obvious person to bat 3, considering he's no longer an all-rounder, is Ben, isn't it? But Stokes, that is. But unless he decides to do that, then they'll fudge it one way or another between now and the end of the series.
What about Root at 3?
And then what?
Root 3, Brook 4, Stokes 5, Bairstow 6, Moeen 7, Woakes 8, the rest.
Yeah, could do that. Could do that. I think Joe has volunteered that, hasn't he? I mean, look, I don't know. I think the best one would be Ben, honestly, in terms of his experience, in terms of his role now in the team. That he's not an all-rounder anymore. That's why we have to pick Johnny as a keeper and play Woakes and all the rest of it, is to make up for the fact that Ben is no longer, in this series anyway, until he gets his knee fixed, is no longer considered an all-rounder. So that would be the most obvious one for me. I've always I'm not going to turn around and say I want Joe Root at number 3, because I've always said leave him at 4. Always, when this argument has raised before, leave the boy, leave him alone, leave him where he plays best. Moving him around does not help any, because you just have to replace him at number 4 with somebody who's not as good as him at number 4. So what's the point? Do you know what I mean? Just leave him where he is. He's fine.
Yeah. And just finally, how much are you enjoying the series? I mean, we hyped it up as much as possible. I didn't think it could live up to that hype, but it actually has. And it's 2-1 with the break. I think it would have been horrific if it was done before this break, but they got it done at Headingley. How much are you enjoying it, and just how great has this series been?
I think everybody is loving it. win or lose. And maybe we've come around to the point of the whole thing. Is that win or lose, both teams, both sets of fans are thinking it's absolutely brilliant. The losing part is always that never changes. That's always sore for a few days. But then I suppose you then look back on it without the visceral hurt of having been beaten, and then you go, well, what about that? How great was this? How brilliant was that? And now we've got you've got the series or the next Test match set up beautifully. It could have been all over. It isn't, and it was won in great style once again. Or with great drama anyway. So great style is probably pushing it, but with great drama once again. And you would expect it if the Old Trafford pitch has got pace and carry in it, like Headingley has, which it has the capability of doing and being, then we could get another classic.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that results maybe don't matter as much as they used to, but had England lost that, I think that definitely would have mattered.
Well, no, listen, I'm not saying that, but I think from the team sort of mantra, out of the sort of the heat, the white heat of the immediate aftermath, you can kind of, yesterday made you think you can kind of understand what they're saying. Was that that it was that both sets of supporters enjoyed it equally, even though one of them ended up going home losing. But you're right. I mean, if we'd lost the series 3-0, then it's a massive pile-on, isn't it? But as I said, that England now look like they've got a team that match Australia on paper. You have that extra pace in there, and and England now have four seamers, genuine seamers, because in the first couple of games when Ben was sort of like he was just half a bowler, you knew that there was an imbalance there. Now, because of Pope's injury, unfortunate for him, but because of Pope's injury, because there was a batter less, they've been able to plug that fourth bowler gap, and they managed to play a spinner, and they got a 90-mile-an-hour bowler. So bowling wise, they've got all of the tools that they need. They just need one or two of the batters to make. They'll say telling contributions. They're kind of like less bothered about the numbers and more bothered about somebody doing something when it's really needed. I guess that's exactly what Brook delivered in the final innings of the game. What Mark Wood delivered twice. Now, but before we go, how good a game did Chris Woakes have as well?
Amazing, absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's amazing how he keeps on doing it in England. Statistically, his record in England couldn't really be any better. Yet he sort of played by accident. Another just brilliant Test match.
Yeah, fantastic. And can't wait for the next one. And nothing happened either. Nothing silly happened. So the Aussies will still get booed. And
the haircut gate was very silly.
It was very silly. It wasn't even true. I mean, it wasn't even true. But that will rumble on, and I think that does actually get under the skin of the opponents eventually, or at least the individuals involved, because it's particularly when you kind of stand there and you can look yourself in the mirror and go, you know what, I really don't think I did anything wrong here, and yet I'm getting panned for it, and I'm going to continue to get panned for it. It chips away at you. His batting was less than optimal, shall we say, during that Test match. Keeping was still good.
Well, it couldn't really be set up any better going into this 9-day breaks. 2 on Australia, 2 tests to go. We'll be at Old Trafford in 8 days' time. Butch, cheers for your time. Catch you next week.
No worries. All that time, there's plenty of time for lots and lots of nonsense stories about the Australians. So get writing, get composing.
See what we can come up with this week.
All right. Speak to you soon.
For this episode's Kia's Movement That Inspires moment, Kia is giving you the chance to watch the highly anticipated 5th Ashes Test against Australia at the Kia Oval on July 30th. Not only will you attend day 4 of the test, but you can watch it from the luxury of the Kia box. For a chance to win a pair of tickets, all you need to do is enter by the link in the description. Joe, thank God England won that, What a miserable couple of weeks that would have been had Australia gotten over the line.
Oh, absolutely. It was definitely relief rather than joy that I felt as the winning runs were hit yesterday. It would have done, and Australians will possibly disagree with me here, but would have done the series a disservice if it had been 3-0 after 3. It just, that wasn't the dynamic that we've seen over the last few weeks. I'd be interested to know, actually, from a few of our Aussie listeners, how many of them were actually secretly rooting for England yesterday, because it would have been quite a dull couple of weeks following this, wouldn't it? If England had collapsed yesterday, which, at different times looked eminently possible, it would have just, the excitement would have been punctured immediately. Would have been trying to kid ourselves that these matches meant something when actually they wouldn't have done, really. There'd have been the root and branch analysis of Bazball and how it's destroyed England's chances of winning the Ashes, which wouldn't have been true anyway. So, thank God. I felt oddly confident through pretty much all of yesterday, the evening of day 4. When Duckett and Crawley got through to stumps on day 4, I felt England are definitely going to do this. But Bairstow's dismissal yesterday was the moment where I thought, maybe I've got this horribly wrong. Maybe we were destined to lose this series 5-0. So huge relief, huge excitement now. I mean, Old Trafford's going to be a serious test match, and then we could be back here for the decider.
Could you imagine our pod chat about selection for Old Trafford had England gone 3-0 down? It would have been totally miserable.
I mean, that's part of the relief, that we don't have to go through that.
Just to, not that for a second anyone who listens to this nonsense thinks that we have any great insights behind the curtain, but just to illustrate what yesterday involved for us. At 3:43, so your first question to Joe was, thank God for that. At 3:43, I texted Joe, substituting the word God for another word, 4 letters. Thank for that. At 3:48, you wrote exactly the same thing. So let's disabuse anyone of the notion that we're kind of coldly looking at this stuff from a professional perspective. Oh no. This was nerve-shreddingly grim, brutish. It was a horrifying afternoon for me. I literally didn't eat anything until the game was finished.
Fair to say you'd given up hope several times over the course of this test match that England had any chance to come back in.
I'd massively given up hope.
When Marsh scores at 100, I was like, what the hell's going on?
Second morning when England lost a few in the first session and they were staring down the barrel of a 70-80 run deficit, I'd lost hope then. And I'd lost hope yesterday afternoon when they were 6 down, because I saw 80 runs, 4 wickets in hand. Woakes hasn't really batted in a while. It was skittish in the first dig. And it's a big ask for a kid up the other end to have the balls to see it through. I'd totally given up. 80 needed 6 wickets down.
80 just seems like an impossibly large number. Like when you face it in that conversation, it's like, how does anyone ever score 80 runs? 80? To count to 80 would take like 10 minutes. Yeah. It's funny as well, because the whole thing that England are saying is like they want to entertain. Has anyone actually properly enjoyed any of this? Right?
No, that was utterly miserable. That was so painful to watch. Every time you thought England might have just nudged ahead, they lost a wicket.
But there was something odd about, because they scored so quickly, usually that situation of needing 80 to win, that would have probably taken hours for us to get there, because they'd have crawled, they wouldn't have been running singles, they'd have been protecting that. But they did it so quickly, it was really odd. And I wasn't fortunate enough to be at Headingley, but I was at my brother's in North London, and he's done a big barbecue, but no one's paying any attention to that whatsoever. My family aren't cricket fans, but everyone was absolutely glued to TMS in the garden, the TV inside, and it started to feel very, very like 2005, where those casual fans who don't really care or even understand about cricket, leading some quite annoying questions at some high tension moments, but we'll take that. Are suddenly absolutely glued, and it's such a joy to see.
Yeah, my mate Jeff has his girlfriend, American girlfriend's birthday, it was yesterday. He managed to persuade her to cut short the brunch and get home to watch it that afternoon. The day before, she declared to him that cricket is as silly as wrestling. And by the end of the afternoon, she had conceded that Brooke has got real style, actually, when you look at it. It was miserable. It was awful. It was terrible. But straight after it, went out in the garden, mowed the lawn, poured myself a gin and tonic, had a marvellous afternoon, having gone through the ringer all day.
It's like
I'm so glad it's over, and I'm so glad we can sit here and just not look at each other and be embittered by the very existence of each other.
Having a bit of a breather is nice as well, isn't it? This gap before Old Trafford feels kind of like everyone needs it, I think, at this point.
Yeah,
so there's nothing cricketers like more than not playing cricket. It's nothing cricket fans like more than actually not watching cricket is the bit afterwards. And the gap as well is just that, like, actually, touch wood, but if England lose at Old Trafford, it won't feel as bad because it's back to back. It's really this 8-day gap that would have been totally unbearable. That's the bit. It was, even those 2 tests, once you're into them, might have felt okay, but this bit would have been the real soul crushing bit. And so thank England spared that.
Just going back to emotions, Phil, we were talking before we recorded that there are times in the Lord's Test where I felt angry at what England were doing. Whereas
betrayed.
Yesterday it was betrayal. It was like, don't you understand? You're supposed to win this.
Yeah.
We can't let them win 3-0 after all this hype.
I kept going back to Toby, our commercial head, who pulls out these amazing deals all over the place, and it's kind of predicated on this being an amazing event.
Ben, as well, yesterday I had a horrible thought early on. It was like the outfield was so slow because of the overnight rate. It was hard for England to have those little 20 to 30 run little bursts that they so often do, just because unless the ball was absolutely leathered, the ball just wouldn't go to the fence in that first hour or so in particular.
Yeah, we're going straight into outfield stuff.
Give the people what they want.
More areas where we're more comfortable.
But you know that people out there go, give me outfield chat.
Yeah, it was. And there's been lots of chat about the conditions in this series. Some Australian fans and journalists have been almost fuming, almost conspiratorial that somehow England are creating this, that every time Australia come out to bat, the clouds come over, and every time England come out, the sun is shining. This wasn't England batting in the clouds exactly. It was the overnight rain, which, by the way, I cycled home in from Headingley Stadium to Pudsey up a really big hill.
Go past that pub.
I did go past the White Horse. Yeah, I had to wring my socks out when I got home. That's how wet it was. But yeah, the outfield was slow, and it did make the chase harder. And then I suppose when Mark Wood comes out, he's not hitting it on the floor anyway. So
obviously the result was different. But Joe, did you sense that England were smarter at all than they were early in the series? I mean, the margins have been so minuscule across the series; it's quite hard to have concrete narratives after each Test match. But also the 3 changes to the team: Moeen Ali with his 17-over spell on day 2, and the 2 match winners, Mark Wood and Chris Woakes, all made huge contributions.
Yeah, I owe Chris Woakes an apology. I question whether he would be lengthening the batting lineup, given he hasn't done it for a while in his record against Australia. And
he'd be really gracious. He wouldn't mind.
He wouldn't mind, would he? And he bowled.
Well, we've all got our
He bowled
opinions.
beautifully. It's actually, I'm ashamed to say it, but I think I'd forgotten how good Chris Woakes was. I can't believe I'm still saying that, having done this for so long and falling into that trap again. But he bowled absolutely beautifully. Batted not that smartly, I didn't think, in the first innings. That period of play where Moeen and Woakes got out in quick succession to the short ball didn't seem like very smart cricket when Stokes was at the other end. So I think there were still moments of frustration, but broadly I think there was more adaptability. I thought Duckett and Crawley, it wasn't a huge opening partnership in the second innings, but I think they deserve quite a bit of credit as well. You know, they rode their luck a little bit in that session on day 3, but looked reasonably comfortable and looked pretty comfortable for, half an hour or so on day 4, scoring singles, not hitting boundaries, taking advantage of some quite defensive fields from Cummins. So I think there was more signs of cricket smarts. Again, I think Stokes led the way with that. We saw him explode in the first innings when he needed to, but prior to that, he'd played pretty sensibly with Moeen Ali, who also played very sensibly before falling into the Cummins trap and getting caught at short fine leg. But I think there are signs that England have perhaps maybe got a bit overexcited in the lead up to the series. They were telling the press, they were telling the world, they were telling themselves that they're going to come out and just blast Australia. And I think that was never realistic. They still got the capability of doing that in sessions, but they can't do it throughout a whole Test match. And I think we've now got to a kind of happier medium where they haven't betrayed the principles of baseball. They haven't contradicted themselves, but they're just picking and choosing their moments a bit better.
Woakes, who's an absolute bad boy, by the way, and we forget he's imprisoned by how pretty he is. He's an absolute tough nut cricketer. But he said exactly that at the end quite explicitly. He said, yeah, essentially that we need to recognise when we need to pick our moments, basically. And definitely the penny's dropped, and it's flowed from Stokes, as Joe says, no doubt about it. I like the look of the team beforehand. I like the balance of it. I like that the tail felt not quite as flimsy as it did at Lord's. Obviously there are slightly compromised positions because of various injuries and loss of personnel, but I like the balance, and I can't really see them changing too much. Perhaps one seamer for next week, but that'd probably be that.
Just on the tail, I think you don't only get the additional runs the better bowlers the bowlers who are better at batting will score. It's also the extra runs your number 6s and 7s are likely to get because they've got someone else to bat with you. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Brooke scores those runs with Woakes at the other end.
Just quickly on style of play as well, because I think we've talked about, Australia's sort of pragmatism showing up, some of the naivety perhaps of Bazball earlier in the series. I think in this test, some of Australia's negativity was showing up at times, that the way they kind of batted back Moeen for that period in the second innings, and then eventually Labuschagne and Smith got out to like crazily, uncharacteristically kind of just stupid shots, really, or badly executed shots. I mean, at that moment, talking about moments where I thought England had lost, where Khawaja and Labuschagne were just blunting England's attack, that felt like one, but actually they didn't really capitalise on that moment. They didn't lose a wicket for a long period of time, but they also didn't score many runs, and it gave Moeen a bit of confidence. Moeen could settle into a rhythm. He got those 2 wickets, and from then on, really, that was the moment that England seized the game.
Ben, James asked, why has Chris Woakes not played more home tests in the last few years? I mean, over a really long period of time now, he averages 35 with the bat and 22 with the ball. So statistically, you're in best in the world territory in home tests. Yet almost in this team as an afterthought, because he's the only one left standing. And his away record is obviously not great, but India, for example, tend to pick players who are dominant at home and they're very comfortable leaving them out in different conditions. Axar Patel, for example, played a lot at home but not away.
Yeah, well, I mean, last year he had a knee injury that required surgery, so he missed that whole summer pretty much. So that's partly why I didn't play last year. But yeah, it is partly because England feel that he's a known quantity to an extent, I guess, that if you're looking, he's long been inked in as this post-Anderson successor, and then Anderson's turned out to be the post-Anderson successor. Basically, Woakes is now 34. He's not going to fill that role for that long, and England have maybe seen enough of him to know that, okay, he can be absolutely brilliant at home, but do we know we're getting away? But I mean, that does mean that you can forget just how superb he is at home. And the thing today is, it was in this game, I mean, when you look at him versus Mark Wood, Woakes takes 6 wickets and scores 42 runs. Wood takes 7 wickets and scores 40 runs. And when you actually look at the moments when Woakes got those wickets in the first innings, he got Marsh and Head just when it looked like actually England have quite a bad day having inserted Australia. And then it's Wood who then makes use of the opening prize, open the tail. And then it's hard to remember when each day actually
Saturday.
was. It was day 3. Yeah, it was day 3 when it had rained. And actually it felt like those clouds were going to set in and be there the whole evening, but that wasn't actually the case. We had actually quite a short window to make the most of it, and it was Woakes who absolutely did that, getting Marsh who did in the first innings, and then Carey. Those are 4 absolutely massive wickets, and he gets proper batters out when they're set, and he makes the most of movement when it's on offer. He is an absolute gem, and the batting is kind of a bonus, but it's also vital at times as well.
He should have had. It was him who should have had Marsh on 12 as well, wasn't it? That Root
that's
put him
right.
down.
Yeah.
And I think he had another catch dropped off it. So all top 7 wickets, I think, across the 6 wickets across the Test match.
The other thing to say on him, he had that injury, as Ben says, but he's been pretty fit for most of his career. He's a natural sports person. You can see it in his
Good
frame.
at snooker.
Sorry?
Good at snooker.
Did I mention that? Did I mention that? He's played 46 Test matches. He's 34 years old, right? Sure. But he's been managed pretty well by England. He's not played an enormous amount of cricket. They've not flogged him in one-day cricket. So if Anderson is reaching the end, whether the end comes soon or whether the end is pushed back a little bit, but he's still the best bet for the next in line seamers at the moment for the next 2 years at home. And if Anderson can go to 40 and Broad can go to 37, then Chris Woakes has potentially got another two years in and around the side. And he's proved he's a World Cup winner. He's proved that he fancies it in the big occasions. That he's not a useful squad member, but he's a lot more than that. He played 46 Test matches. He's made the best part of 2,000 runs and taken 136 wickets. So he's a hardened cricketer, and it's such a joy to see him back and really fancying it, not tiptoeing onto the stage, but having it. So his future is still very much in the Test match game.
Ben, Wood was just electric, hitting 96.5 miles per hour on the first day, bowling Khawaja with one that was 95 miles per hour. I don't think people realise just how much he's improved and how he's a different bowler since he lengthened that run up in 2019, because the vast majority of his home Test cricket came before that. So since lengthening that run up where he got a bit quicker. He averages 24 with the ball in Test cricket. And we talk a lot about Jofra Archer's injuries, and rightly so, but Wood has actually played fewer home tests since then than Archer has. And he's such a miss for England when he's not around.
Yeah, and as much as you say that, you know, people are not realising how good he is, there is a genuine sense just from everyone of like a sort of a sitting forward in the chair when he comes on to bowl. And that was right from the very first ball on that first morning. He bowls it, and then everyone goes to look at the speed gun. There's an intake of breath, and you see it's 91. And the next ball is bowled, look up to the speed gun, it's 93. Next ball is bowled, look at the speed gun, it's 95. And like, it was so good that the crowd were actually almost like forgetting to react, because there was just like, they were so fixed on it, watching it, and then watching the ball go past, and then watching what the measurement was basically. But he was also, I mean, it's also worth saying as well, like, there is loads of focus on his speed. He was finding
the accuracy.
Yeah, it was the accuracy. Like that first
right.
spell, he didn't concede a run off the bat in the first 22 balls.
Yeah,
he was swinging it as well.
So if you compare it to Stark, who's had a really good series,
he was brilliant yesterday, wasn't he?
Yeah, but you know that there's always a 4 ball in there against Stark, and while he might blow you away, he'll probably go at 4s and so on. Same applied to Brett Lee back in the day. Generally, there's a trade-off with the uber quicks, but Wood he's got such a repeatable action. And because he really sharpened his skills in one-day cricket, he has that kind of control as well. And when it starts to swing, and you actually see the seam perfectly canted to first slip, and it's wanged down at that kind of pace, it veers towards the not fair stage. You know, this veers into territory that is almost off the charts, and literally off the charts. So that's the point, really, because a batter can sit in and wait for the long hop or wait for the leg stump half volley and get a bit of bat on it, and it's obviously going to fly. But you just didn't get any of that with him. So what was that, three maidens in the first?
Yeah, so the first 22 balls, the only runs were 4 leg buys, and then 4 buys over Bairstow's head, and then 2 off the 23rd ball, and then he bowled Khawaja.
Right. So if you're thinking from a batter's perspective, it starts to feel futile. Stokes said at the end of the game, the thing with Wood is that you get wickets at the other end because of that combination of pace, fear, and, you know, nagging accuracy. I mean, you should not be able to have all of those components, and yet he does. And so obviously, as a batter, psychologically, you're thinking, right, how the hell can I get out of this situation? Get up the other end and see what I can make up the other end.
I mean, the thing I find most astonishing about it is how infrequently he plays. And then when he does, he's just absolutely bang on it. I mean, he hasn't played a test match since the Pakistan tour. He hasn't played a game of any cricket since the IPL in, late April. Yet he's right on the money. And you might say, with a bowler of his type, it's actually beneficial that he doesn't play very much because he doesn't get injured. And I absolutely take that point. But also, how does he find that rhythm just immediately? And in general, we talk a lot about, you know, preparation, given the schedule that exists now. Butch is obviously very hot on it as a former pro and talks about the need to prepare to get into a test match. But this kind of test match blew that out of the water to an extent, because you had Wood doing what he did, you had Woakes doing what he did, Mitch Marsh hadn't played a game for months and comes out and bats like he did. Even Moeen's bowling to an extent in this match, having done no red ball bowling for years, started to look a lot more comfortable. It was an odd game in that players just were playing so well. I mean, the quality, if you think Wood got player of the match, didn't he? Which I guess I suppose he had to, but equally, the innings that Stokes played would get player of the match in pretty much every other game. Woakes to take 6 quality wickets and see them home, absolutely, again, legitimate player of the match candidate. And Mitch Marsh, you'd say, what an innings that was. We barely talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, Mitch Marsh is feeling slightly hard done by, really. Run a ball 100 in those conditions and wickets. I didn't actually see the Moeen spell on what second evening. So it seems, looking at the scorecards, that Smith and Labuschagne sort of went on the block. But was Moeen sort of as accurate as he is in our dreams rather than in our fears, that he maybe didn't have those kinds of skills to offer anymore? What was happening in that spell?
It was not a spell you really associate with Moeen. It was, he came on the ball and it was a really quiet period when Labuschagne and Khawaja were together. And then you kind of looked up and like, he's bowled 6-7 overs here, they've gone for nothing. And Australia, I guess, is partly because of how well he bowled, but also if you're thinking the other way around, how would England have played Moeen? really short straight boundary. So when Stokes hits that 80, the real acceleration comes against Todd Murphy, who I think bowled fine, by the way. But there's a really short straight boundary, so it wasn't actually that risky to take it on. And Australia just took no risks against Moeen. For as well as he bowled, they let him bowl. And I think, Joe made the point about Australia's conservatism perhaps coming back to bite them in this test. And I think that was a really clear moment where they let an England player get into the game who they didn't need to let get into the game.
Yeah, there was one moment, it was maybe the 4th or 5th over he bowled, and at that point you're a bit worried basically because the first ball is quite a big full toss that gets like not punished, gets hit to the fielder, and then the next is like short and wide, which I think gets cut for 4. But actually, Stokes' field settings and England's fielding really helps this point because there were a couple more drag downs in that over, but they were basically they were brilliantly stopped before they could cause any real damage. So that the over only ends up going for 5 or 6 rather than maybe like 12 or 13, and then Moeen can kind of get into it. So I think that was the thing. It was actually almost the fact that he'd got through overs without too much punishment meant that he actually started bowling better at that point, I think. I was trying to think about this from an Australian point of view, like how they will view this game, because they might look at it and think, actually only 4 of our guys in Marsh, Head, Cummins and Stark really turned up and we still within 3 wickets of England. Equally, they might look at it and think like, there's not too much that we actively, like when you're pinpointing mistakes, the only thing you'd really look at is the Labuschagne Smith wickets. The rest was kind of being outplayed to an extent, right? And actually England were the ones, who gave them a few chances in the field and that sort of thing. I don't know how, and equally with those 4 guys doing well, you look at the rest, the batting hasn't looked that consistent yet. And the bowling, you're looking like actually beyond Stark and Cummins, who are the elite guys. I guess Hazelwood might come back in, but you're really looking at those 2 guys. You've got a green spinner, and they're not quite sure with that third seamer. I'm trying to work out how.
Well, so I wonder on that, on the selection, for what it's worth. I wonder if they might bring Green in for Boland and play both the all-rounders. Because you'd think what Green brings to your team, you're going to want. If England have got real pace in Wood and possibly even Tongue as well, then 8, 9, 10, 11 does look a little bit vulnerable. So if you were to bring Green in place of another medium fast, Hazelwood's not been especially impressive. Looks slightly short of a gallop. Boland's gone the distance. No, not sure if anyone saw that coming, but England have really gone after him. I think he averages 112 in England now, something like that.
England have really put him off his
They've done it very well. They've done it very, very smartly. Controlled aggression against him outside
I'd be surprised
the crease
if we see Boland again in the series.
Yeah,
at this
right.
point.
So can you see that possibly they bring?
I hadn't thought of
Green
it, but
in?
actually it makes a lot of sense. I don't think you do lose that much on the bowling side of things, and you obviously gain a hell of a lot with the batting.
I guess the gamble is the spinner. If Nathan Lyon was playing, then it would be very persuasive.
This is the thing. So in the 4th innings, Tom Murphy, I think, only bowls 2 overs. One of them was kind of why not over before lunch, and the other one was actually when the game was probably almost too late to give him the ball. If Nathan Lyon's playing, he's bowling 10 to 15 to 20 overs in that 4th innings. And I thought that, again, if you're switching it round, if England had a new spinner like Todd Murphy, who I actually think bowled all right when he did bowl, Stokes would get him in the game so much earlier and he'd feel important. You got the sense that Cummins didn't really trust him. And I wonder how pivotal that will be for the next test match, where if it is a little bit flatter and you expect it to be Old Trafford, when you want your spin to be bowling more, how much that plays into how England approach him almost now that England have seen how Australia see Murphy. Sure. So again, that attack felt weirdly reliant on Stark and Cummins, I thought. Ben, you were there for all 4 days. Just how great was the atmosphere? Like, absolutely incredible. Like, we talk about knowledgeable crowds in England, but the Headingley crowd was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I said this on the pod yesterday, so if you listen to all the dailies, apologies for repetition, the best knowledgeable crowd moment was when Mitch Marsh was batting on again, I can't remember days or Melbourne to 1, but he blocks one, it goes down by his feet, and then he bends down, picks it up, and then after half a second realises, shouldn't have done that, because obviously England could have appealed and would have been out of obstruction in the field.
Not necessarily, obviously, by the way.
Sorry, yeah, fine. England obviously don't appeal, but you get the Western Terrace at about 6 p.m, all obviously, beer up to the eyeballs, but hating the Aussies, but also know the rules, and they have a crowd appeal at that point. It's like that's what's beautiful about Test cricket in at that ground, and it is a shame that in 2027 it's not going to be there, because every moment
Poor
on
Old
that
Trafford. I mean, it's a joke, that scheduling, really.
Nothing north of the Trent. Yeah, it's bollocks. There was a few concerns building into it with all the brouhaha at Lords and with Headingley being a combustible place and the two teams not entirely sure of each other. But it seemed from afar, albeit that it went off really, really well, and that both teams sort of mutually recognised where the line is and didn't overstep it, didn't get out of control. There was Bairstow's line to Smith when he got out, but I mean that was pretty tame.
I mean, the worst thing that happened was the Alex Carey haircut gate.
Right, yeah. So I've only vaguely followed that. I know Alistair Cook's in the frame. I don't really have the energy to go through it.
I don't think we need to. Just Google Alex Carey haircut. And that.
Fine.
I suppose the only lose 2 minutes. Of your
Here he goes.
The only thing. Not about Alex Carey haircut. The only thing that's sort of notable about this game is the Bairstow sledge, if you even want to call it that, was entirely innocuous. The thing that's notable is that Smith bites back, right, which is what Australia have not done this whole time. And Alex Carey has been very good up to this point in the series. This might have just been one off game, two low scores, but the reception for him was so hostile, and that will be a narrative that will continue through the series unless, if he makes runs or he doesn't, that will be kind of, people will see it in the aftermath of what happened at Lords, whether rightly or wrongly, I guess.
Well, Mark Taylor made the point in commentary. He thought Alex Carey, as a batter, looked much more subdued than he usually does. And he said, it would be, even though he's a very tough character, it's not surprising if the whole thing has had some impact on the way that he, feels about the game and the atmosphere of the Ashes. Still keeping very, very well.
I put a tweet out wondering whether this has been the closest ever start to a 5-match series. The margins are 2 wickets, 43 runs, and 3 wickets. And then a guy on Twitter called @OhLookAtWill replied saying, if we define a close result as a result either way by fewer than 50 runs or 3 or fewer wickets, then there have been 4 series in the history of the game with 2 close finishes, but this is the first with 3. Can you name the 3? You're never going to get them. It's the 1907 Ashes, India and Australia in 77, 78, and West Indies in Bangladesh a couple of years ago.
That is top work by that chap.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I don't know how he's done that.
Is that how you're doing your work these days, Yas? You're just asking people on Twitter to answer your questions for you?
It's a good way to start. Andrew asks, is this the most excitable and watchable series since 2005? Every game is so tight. Both teams are never getting too far away from each other. Other previous series have had great victories and moments, sure, but I can't remember a series where the two teams have been in the game all the time. Phil, I think he's right. I think with 3 tests in and it's not over after 14 days, I think we can now say this is already a great series.
Yeah, I think the standard is probably a bit higher. It lacks, an all-time great wrist spinner, and it's a shame to lose Nathan Lyon. A real shame to lose him because he's a champion. But for ebb and flow and for complete absence of quiet periods.
That's it, isn't it?
Because even if you look at the 05 in isolation, England were behind after day one at Lords and lost quite comfortably by about 80 odd runs. Old Trafford, Trent Bridge, they enforced the follow on, so massively up in that game. England bossed most of Old Trafford as well. And the final game was a draw, albeit obviously immensely important final afternoon. So there were some quiet moments in that series, and moments where one team was dominant. In this, every hour has felt pivotal and crucial, and the standard from the start really has been extraordinary.
I guess one thing that we're missing so far, with the exception of Khawaja in the first Test match, is just great innings of normal batsmanship, really, and root in the first Test match as well. That's been
passé now.
That is true. That is true.
We don't really want those, do we?
That is true.
What we won't be able to replicate with 2005 was that sheer, from an English perspective, was that sheer desperation to win. That thought that finally we might be able to beat them. That's not really the case now because Australia haven't won over here for so long. I suppose Australia have that to an extent, that they haven't won over here for a long period of time, but it almost allows you just to sit back and enjoy the cricket more. I say that after enjoying yesterday.
When have you enjoyed it?
From now on. Whereas 2005 was, if England had lost that series, I don't think I'd have been able to sit back at the end of it and gone, well, at least there was some good cricket played. I'd have been absolutely
Yeah, there was immense jeopardy on 05 because cricket it was their final year on free to air, and cricket had been in the doldrums, and the ecosystem of cricket at the time was threatened for various reasons. The same applies now, though, I would say. So it's a different landscape, but it's just as mottled and as threatened as it was in 05. And so there's a poignancy to this series, and you just want it to go on as long as possible because you don't know how much longer it's going to look like this.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. A good moment to bring up that IPL owner who said Test cricket should just be like Wimbledon. What a clown. Who wants this to just be 2 weeks every year?
Yeah.
Anyway, all our Ashes moments of the week are brought to you by our stylish partners, Charles Tyrwhitt, the menswear brand, are famous for their smart shirts, suits, and down to their comfy polos and chinos. They've even got Joe Root support as their latest brand partner.
He's their kind of guy.
To get 20% off head-to-toe outfits, head to charlestyrwhitt.com and use the promo code Wisden23 at checkout. Ben, our moment of the week is Moeen Ali coming to bat at 3 in the run chase. After the game, Ben Stokes revealed that it was Moeen's idea. He suggested it to McCullum. What did you make of England's use of the number 3 slot in this game? Brooke, obviously there in the first innings, then back at 5 in the second where he was brilliant.
Yeah, well, taking outside sort of what it means going forward, there's something beautiful about Moeen asking to bat at number 3, right? This is a guy who, like, a month ago was, done with Test cricket. He's been messed around so much by England. He didn't want that anymore.
And before this Test match, he's too high at 7.
Yeah, and he gets a text from Ben Stokes saying Ashes, replies lol, and then he comes back in, and now all of a sudden he is fully, properly embedded back in. It's not just that he's, like, happy to do a job to help out a mate. He, like, wants to be right at the centre of everything, and okay, it didn't work out. But also, it kind of did, right? Brooke, okay, it'd been 1 innings at number 3, and maybe he'll go back up there and score 100 at Old Trafford, but he gets back where he's more familiar at number 5 and plays the innings that wins England the game, basically.
I thought it was an inspired move by Moeen. Almost irrelevant whether it worked or not. It's what it symbolised, what it represented. And it shows that he's up for it, shows that he's buzzing after the way that he bowled, shows that there's a bit of confidence there after the way that he batted for an hour or so in the first innings. I think what it symbolises is very, very... it reflects well on him. It was almost immaterial whether he actually got 20 or 30 or not. The fact that he thought that he could was enough.
Joe, everyone asks, what are England going to do at number 3?
Well, I don't think Moeen's going to stay there. Did the Stokes say that afterwards? That's not really an option.
Yeah.
It's tricky with Harry Brooke because obviously, again, he's coming at 5 and looked great, and that is the position he's got all his runs in so far for England. I don't have a huge problem with him batting at 3, really. I think he has got the game for it. He might need to tone it down slightly for the first 5 overs or so, or he might not and just carry on playing as he does. I know I was reading a Ben Jones piece on Wisden.com, which showed that he's not got a good record at 3 for Yorkshire either, but I suspect those games were kind of before Harry Brooke became the Harry Brooke that we see now, so probably aren't that relevant. I don't even know if I can be asked to say it, but... I haven't got a problem with Brooke batting at 3, but I do think it should be Joe Root at 3. I think that is the logical solution to this predicament. And I think, it is a tired old argument, but I think things have changed since we probably last had it, and that when he was captain, I think it was fair enough. He had enough on his plate, and he should be able to bat where he wanted to at that stage. Now I think the kind of team ethos has changed a bit. Everyone does what's best for the team, and I think Root batting at 3 probably would do that. He's also, he got 102 tests to go. He's not out of form by any stretch, but he's not in such kind of otherworldly form at 4 that you think moving him would be crazy. So I think, I don't think it will happen, but I would prefer Root to be at 3. If that doesn't happen, then I think Brooke at 3 is fine, although not ideal.
There's 2 things that really impact it, I think. One is if Ben Stokes is fit to bowl at Old Trafford. The other is whether England, press the Ben Foakes button, basically. I am more and more coming around to the idea that Ben Foakes kind of has to play. We didn't know where Bairstow's keeping was before the series, so I can understand that then, but Bairstow's keeping is kind of already losing England the series.
If England lost this, England would have lost the series, and 2 of the games they lost, Bairstow made a number of really bad mistakes by the subs.
If Foakes comes in, the only thing is, if you then do want to retain Bairstow, which I think England will still want to, that then gives you more of an issue at number 3. or because what they could do if Stokes can bowl is you end up leaving out one of the bowlers who played, or you go with, a 4-man attack rather than the 5-man attack, and then you can actually just call in someone from outside of the squad. I mean, they still really like Alex Lees. They could say have Alex Lees even open and push one of those 2 guys down to number 3. That would be one way to go, and you end up then with a more normal looking team with people who are in the places that make sense. But that only really works if Ben Stokes can bowl, because as well as Moeen bowled on day 3, I don't think England will be like, this guy's now going to be able to hold down an end for 2 test matches. So those are the 2 main things. If Stokes can bowl and whether England pick Ben Foakes, that influences whether they need to find a 3 from within their kind of existing 11 as played at Headingley, or if they can call one in from outside of the team, I guess.
But are you accepting that none of that's going to happen? They're just going to stick with Bairstow? Because I'd be amazed if they switch from Bairstow now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I basically I'm just backing that they often make the right calls, and I think this would be the right call. And I think you'd hope there's a way that they can be just mature and honest about it, and have a chat with Best and say, look, you're a very valuable member of the team. You're still going to play, but your keeping's not where he wants it to be, and hopefully find a way to actually imbue him with more confidence, which seems to be lacking across all elements of his game. Like, I'd hope they'd be able to, but equally, yeah, it
feels like a long shot
on balance
to me.
that I don't think they will, but I think there's a chance that they do, especially because they also have this time between tests to reflect and think what they can look back at the first 3 tests and think like, okay, what have we got right, what have we got wrong? Okay, we've got these 2 tests that mean everything. Let's make the decision that we have to make, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also worth remembering Bairstow hasn't been good enough in the series as keeper, clearly, but he has been good enough in the past. It's not that he's just not a good enough keeper.
Mm-hmm.
He's a keeper in bad form, and we give bowlers and batters the opportunity to come out of bad form. I don't know how much work he can do over the next 10 days in order to get himself up to scratch. He spent a long time on the sidelines, not keeping wicket, not batting. He has got time to make up in that sense. And it was, I know the shot he played yesterday wasn't good. He hasn't got runs for a little while, but it was only 2 games ago that he scored a runnable 70 odd, which kind of kept England in the game at that stage alongside Root, when it looked like they might kind of disappear for not very much in that first innings. So,
just very briefly, I'll be utterly shocked if they change it. Can't see that happening. And Bairstow throughout his career always tends to score runs when people say he's not going to. And he has looked a bit out of nick. But I think I would fancy him, and he will play at Old Trafford and at the Oval. And I fancy him to affect positively with the bat at least one of those games. The keeping is obviously a massive problem. And if we knew now what we suspected then perhaps it would have been a different selection in the first place. But they think that Bairstow is one of the best 3 batters in the side, and then they work back from that principle. So that's why we are where we are.
James asks, are Brooke and Bairstow the Gerrard and the Lampard of the current England setup? I guess the next question is, who does that make Foakes?
Scholes?
I was going to go Owen Hargreaves.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I don't have, very, very, very briefly, I don't have any issue with Brooke at 3. I think technically he's sound enough to bat 3. He's obsessed with technique, obsessed with defensive technique, and while the ball does move around and he doesn't leave it enough. So the same applies to all of them. Even Joe's playing more shots than he needs to. I prefer Joe at 3, but I'm fine with Brooke at 3. I mean, I had him opening at the start of the summer, so I don't mind it.
I mean, Ben mentioned the possibility of recalling Lees, possibly, but I think
they're just not going to shake it up.
If they do that, then they are dropping Bairstow, right? Which they won't do.
Only no, because you could have Lees at 3,
but it's not going to happen.
7, Brooke at 5, Stokes at 6, and then 4 bowlers.
But it's just not going to happen.
I think that the bowlers debate is interesting as well. I can't see Ollie Robinson playing at Old Trafford, given that he didn't really play in this Test match particularly. I think Josh Tongue should come in. I think it's a really tricky one with Anderson because he just hasn't, and he said himself, hasn't been anywhere near his best in those first 2 tests. He said, "Don't look at my age," but it's hard not to. Look at how the ball's coming out. Really, look at how effective he's been. If we take the age out of the equation, he has struggled, and the pitches haven't really helped him, and the tactics haven't really helped him either. Josh Tongue, in the context of this series, mad as it is to say it, feels to me like a more effective option than Jimmy at
on the two quickest pitches in the land.
And obviously the fact he keeps getting Steve Smith out is a massive tick that can't be underestimated.
Sorry, based on this series, I'd go Broad personally over Tongue, with assuming Woakes and Wood kind of have to play now. But equally, I think England will base the decision almost not on what's gone in this series, but just on how they.
But hold on. So
if they retain the same balance to the side, they can all play.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'm thinking if they go back to a full bowling, which I guess is probably not the case. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
I think I would just have Tongue for Robinson and otherwise leave it as the same side.
I think they'd also just look at how they each pull up though between the two tests. Like 8 days is quite a long time for people to get fit, for someone to get back in rhythm.
And I think they probably would have thought they would rest Broad for this game. But I think they've just got to treat it as, it's a World Cup final. You pick your best side on the day and then you worry about the rest of it later. And I think Broad, based on his,
right?
Yeah, he's been brilliant. I mean, again, Ben mentioned the Woakes spell on the evening of day 3. Broad was absolutely stunning as well. He didn't get the reward for it in the same way, but he was actually bowling almost too well, beating the bat by ridiculous amounts. He was getting so much movement. He's been brilliant. And obviously the Warner Broad story is the big one that everyone talks about, but he's obviously got Labuschagne out on a couple of occasions. He's just looked very, very good throughout.
Well, Broad only took 5, but 4 of the 5 were top 5 batters. Obviously, Warner twice, got rid of Smith, got rid of Head as well. So, he's bowling at the top of his form, and he has that magical alchemy of self-belief, arrogance, legacy, history on his side, all the rest of it. And it feels like, it's odd to say it, but as Anderson fades a little bit out from the centre point, at least, then Broad is sort of growing into that role.
Broad's been absolutely brilliant. And it's amazing seeing someone whose game rises so much for the big occasion. There have been so many times over the last 2 or 3 years where you look at Broad and he looks relatively innocuous. You're kind of like, even though you've taken 550 test wickets, I'm still not actually sure what you're that good at, ridiculously. But then when the Ashes comes around, he's England's leading man.
Well, it's amazing that it seems quite likely that he'll play all 5 tests of this series now, which I don't think most of us had him as not playing the first test of the series.
Yeah.
In the WTC table, by the way, so far, Australia 91.67 points and England minus 8.33. So make of that what you will. I don't know.
That's surely not updated if England are on minus points.
Saying it in front of me on the old Cricinfos. Minus 8.33 seems a bit harsh.
I don't think many England fans are probably
no one else has played.
I don't think many England fans are worried about the state of the World Test Championship table at this point.
Look, the series score is 91.67 v minus 8.33.
I can guarantee this time next summer, when England are 2-0 up against Sri Lanka going to the 3rd Test match, we're going to spend 10 minutes of each show talking about World Test Championship.
How England's overrates in this series cost them their place in the World Championship final.
Absolutely. Anyway, all to play for at Old Trafford in 8 days' time. It's been an amazing week for England in the women's Ashes as well. 2 last over finishes, 2 wins. We didn't give them much of a chance last week at all, but the comeback is now properly on. A 2-0 or 3-0 win in the ODI series would give them the Ashes. Danny White hit 76 in the game at the Kia Oval. Alice Capsey hit 46 off 23 at Lords. Phil, what impressed you about that England win at Lords?
The bottle. They're starting to believe, look, to win 3 ODIs in a row, to pull this out the bag is improbable, but with each moment, it seems like that vast yellow wall just shrinks a tiny bit more. And what's been really good about this is that you have a bunch of established players who have gone through the ringer against Australia, but they are beginning to believe something. And crucially, you got these younger kids. Danny Gibson comes out and reverse sweeps her first ball when the pressure's on. Alice Capsey comes in 17 runs in 5 games and plays beautifully under the lights in front of literally a sellout at Lords. And you're seeing right before your eyes these young kids starting to find some sort of identity in the world game against the only real team in town. And it's just been really heartening to see. As I say, they're probably not going to be able to get the thing over the line. If they do, you'll be talking about it for years and years. But it's just been great, and it's just a proper good contest now. There's nothing equivocal about any of it. There's no sense of, this is your chance to shine. This is your showcase moment. We're on the BBC for a couple of hours. It's not like that now. It's just top quality stuff from top to bottom. Shout out for Darcy Brown, my new favourite cricketer. Great name, straight out of a Gumshoe Chandler novel. Bowls fast, athletic, great energy through the crease. She's a star. And again, more and more, you're seeing, as the MPHs just creep up a little bit, you're seeing an increasing intensity in the women's game. In 3 or 4, 5 years' time, you're going to have more Darcy Brown type bowlers as well, and then the game becomes the full package. Because the one thing that it's lacked is that element of physical fear and reaction time. A woman's reaction time is obviously not slower than a man's reaction time, but the pace is slower, and so you don't have that jeopardy when you're batting to the same extent. But as you're seeing more and more Darcy Brown-like bowlers come through, then that becomes absolutely a key part of the game. And once you have that, then you have the whole lot. It's been great.
And the scheduling's worked really nicely here as well. It wasn't ideal that day 3 of the men's test cut into the start of the T20, but that was kind of unfortunate because obviously there'd been delays. They finished at 7:30. But now we've got a gap in the men's series, and we've got the ODI starting on Wednesday, Sunday, Tuesday. So all wrapped up before the Old Trafford test. So really the focus can switch to the women's series solely for the next kind of few days. And, you know, if England can get what I said, I mean, I think at the start I said they had to win the test match to have any chance, and they lost that. And they're still in with a chance. And I said they could win 1 or 2 of the white ball games, and they've won 2 already, and they've just got 3 to go. So I'm not going to make any predictions whatsoever, but it's just been really great to see. And I think Phil's right. I think that the main noticeable thing of the last 2 games is that they've been in situations which I didn't think they would win in against Australia, and they've done it twice. And without Lanning there to steer the ship, maybe there's a few cracks appearing.
I think this is it. I mean, as impressive as England have been, Australia haven't been as on it as you normally assume them to be. So in the game here, in particular, they gave England 21 extras. That's a full running over in extras. They were a little bit sloppy in a way that you don't normally associate with Australia, and obviously they're massive favourites. But I don't think this is quite the imposing Australia that has totally dominated the world game over the last few years.
Watching Capsy, it struck me that she's on the verge. No other English cricketer's been in her position. English female cricket has been in her position in the history of the game. She's on the verge of becoming very famous and very rich. And she will be the first true breakout star, I think. And Izzy Wong et al. May well be in her slipstream. But what a moment to be an 18-year-old kid, really. Unheard of in this country. And the way that she attacked that run chase under all of that pressure, when a lesser person would barely be able to pick the bat up because of everything that's at stake. And she clears her front leg, and she doesn't just hit it over the rope, she hits it into the stands, and does it with a smile, and the whole world is opening up to her.
Ben, England have named the squad for the ODIs this morning. Tammy Beaumont is back in it, which is obviously no surprise given her ODI record. But Lauren Filer is in after her outstanding test debut. We weren't sure if we'd see her in the white ball stuff, but I'm really glad that she's there. You can imagine that in a high scoring game on a flat pitch, it could be the sort of bowler who makes a difference.
Yeah, and also we just know so little about her still, even after that. Like, we know she's fast, and that's basically all we know. Like, can she rein that pace in slightly to improve some accuracy? Does she need to? Does she have other skills? This is all stuff we're going to find out, basically. With this ODI series, if they can just nick the first one, that sets it up beautifully kind of whatever happens in the second, because if they win the second, then the whole series on the line. Even if they were to lose second, they've still got an ODI series and the prize of a drawn Ashes series going into that final game. So that first game just feels massive, basically, for setting up the series. And yeah, and Australia, I think, firstly, it's easier to be consistent, uber consistent in ODI cricket than T20 cricket. And they probably, say, take someone like Elise Perry, who is like not the same caliber of T20 player as she is in ODI cricket. Like, I think that they'll almost be harder to beat in one-day cricket than in T20 cricket. But given that England now have that confidence that they can beat Australia, who's to say they can't?
We now know the identity of the 4 teams that will be at finals day. It's an all Southern finals day.
Yeah, that Essex game was great, wasn't it? I mean, it kind of had like weird DRS drama early on. There was the Alex Davies caught behind when there was no ultra edge spike, but it quite clearly deflected off his glove. A really brilliant third umpiring decision, which you don't say that too often because they're going by the evidence right there in front of them. That was really great. And then the moment of drama at the end, where spirit of cricket on show again, or in the spotlight again, where Simon Harmer, it's kind of chaos because he hits the ball, he has no idea where it's gone. Dominic Drakes, the bowler, has sort of spotted it, but he's not that close to getting to it, but he still sprints in its direction. Harman then realizes he's been called through, starts to running, collides with Dominic Drakes, is then run out. Don't know if he'd have got there without it, but he's sort of there. You see, there's a good screenshot of like him just sort of mouthing off, and you're not sure who, and it's the umpire who's walking past. And then him and Alex Davies have a nice little word as they're waiting just for the umpire review. And he wonders sometimes saying like, maybe think about recalling that. In the end, Essex squeezed home off the penultimate ball, but that was great. And the other game that was great was
Nate hit 6 off the penultimate ball.
Yeah,
I have no idea how Essex have got to finals day.
Great.
I mean, honestly, two games where they were absolutely cruising, trying to throw away, managed to eventually win both of them, and somehow they're there.
And
lovely.
And Dominic Drakes that penultimate over was 2 wickets, 1 run. That game should never have got as close as it did, and yet very glad it did. And then the Somerset game was pretty extraordinary as well. Actually, they were 5 down pretty early on. Imad Wasim has bowled a 2-wicket over, and Lewis Gregory, the hero of Taunton, like their favourite son, is the guy who sort of drags them over the line and 2 finals day. And they've been the form team in the competition. It would have been almost a travesty if they wouldn't have been at finals day. They've won 13 games so far, which is pretty extraordinary. And so, although
Ben Green as well, who we had on last week, the two of them made it look very easy in the end. And it is Taunton's just a ridiculous ground, as discussed in that interview, that a target can look suddenly seemingly out of reach, and then you've kind of won about 4 overs later. But Gregory's hitting was astonishing.
I feel like Somerset have lots of favourite sons. I feel like people say that of
Tom Abel.
Oh, it's a family club. Yeah. Just very, very on this one. Someone who's a Somerset fan presented an interesting idea that if you play 14 games and you finish top of your group, you should go through to the finals day. Has this been discussed before?
I don't think we have.
And you do it more in the IPL, so you have an eliminator and second place, third, but first, or at least goes through to a sort of playoff to get to the finals or something like that.
It does feel ridiculous after 14 games at Somerset. You could have one bad game and don't get to
ridiculous,
finals day.
but also I kind of like it. It feels quite blast.
Yeah,
I like that.
That is true. And
it feels quite blast.
Surrey and Hampshire were the other 2 teams to qualify. Hampshire basically destroyed Worcestershire. Yeah. And Surrey, Chris Jordan's having a really excellent couple of weeks. He kind of closed off that game at the end there.
That was really high quality. If you go through Dad and I were going through the players in that game, and this would be fine in like an IPL game as the overseas, when you got Roy, Curran, Jordan, Narine, Jacks on the Surrey side, and on the Lancashire side you got Butler, Livingston, and Darren Mitchell and Phil Salt as well. If those were the overseas players in an IPL game, you wouldn't bat an eyelid, I think.
Joe, there's a new Wisden Cricket Monthly out later this week, but before I ask you what's in it, I'm going to read out an all-time classic of an email from Sebastian. Good afternoon. 3 weeks ago, I attended a scientific conference at the London School of Economics. Never before have I visited the UK, so I used this opportunity to buy as many sports newspapers as possible. Just before my return flight, I went to W.H. Smith at Heathrow Airport. Among many magazines, I have noticed one that I have not bought before, Wisden Cricket Monthly. As a sports enthusiast, I heard about cricket, like the success of the IPL or the tale of the 2005 Ashes, but nothing beyond that. I live in Poland, where this sport is considered extremely niche, so my knowledge about it was next to nothing. The quality of journalism in your magazine is really astonishing. During a 3-hour journey, I was deeply absorbed in reading. Moreover, I admire articles devoted to the women's Ashes and other women's competitions. Some media outlets do not manage to care about quality, but your editorial staff is able to give appropriate coverage. After reading it, I decided to watch this year's Ashes. Due to daily work and lack of other forms of broadcast available in my country, I follow it via highlights on YouTube. The whole series, even in this condensed form, has got me hooked on cricket, especially the last day of the second test, Ben Stokes' brilliant performance and the controversial Johnny Bairstow dismissal. I wish all journalists working at Wisden Cricket Monthly all the best. Hardly any sport has the luck of being described by such great experts who celebrate the game in each written word. Also, I wish your national team better luck in the remaining Ashes matches and in defending the title at the upcoming World Cup this autumn. Best regards, Sebastian. He sent that in before Headingley, and we won at Headingley.
God, if he was hooked then, he must be hooked by now.
Yeah, Sebastian, thank you so much for
we need some sort of sweeping Elgar style music. Get Dan to do that when you read that out.
It sounds like we've made that up. That's
a showstopper.
And that came through literally as Phil and I were getting the magazine to print last week. It'd been a bit of a slog of a few days. It's quite tricky. No one thinks of the monthly magazine editors during an Ashes series, but we went to print after the second test. England 2-0 down, and obviously the third test has happened before the magazine comes out. So quite a lot of caveats in this issue. But yeah, that was very gratefully received at that point when we were a little bit tired.
What's in the magazine?
So we've got Mel's exclusive with Pat Cummins takes the cover, which she did the interview just on the eve of the series, but she's obviously filled in details based on what's happened so far. He's on the cover. It's a different style of cover. How would you describe it, Phil? Throwing you a bit of a hospital pass there.
No, it's fine. As light-hearted and deliberately puncturing all the po-faced pomposity that existed in and around Lords and the hand-wringing moralising. So it gently undercuts all of that while celebrating the fact that we've got pound for pound the best cricketer in the world as an exclusive interview.
Yeah, at least that's the intention. Loads of other Ashes stuff in there. Got a really good column from Mark Ramprakash talking about the need for Bazball to show some adaptability, which I think, as we discussed, we saw over the last few days. We've got Andrew Miller on the women's test match and just what a brilliant spectacle it was, and that it left you wanting more. And then we've got a lovely piece from Jim, who speaks to a few people who've been burnt by the Ashes. It's kind of the stories of those who have had kind of promising careers and it hasn't worked out in the Ashes. And just how much more an Ashes series means to Aussie and English players than other series. Adam Voges is probably the most interesting interview in there, who said he would swap the almost Bradman-esque record that he's got just for a bit of success in the Ashes. Obviously didn't manage to get many runs in 2015. And outside of the Ashes, we've got Lawrence Booth tackles the ICEC report. And I mean, I'll leave it to Lawrence to go into there, but obviously really important, and it's crucial to say that came through relatively late in the day of this cycle. We're going to do a big feature on the ICEC report in the form of a round table. Isha's coming back on board to help us with that, and we're getting stuck into that over the next couple of weeks, so there'll be much more to come on that. We've got Nicholas Brooks on Major League Cricket, which starts this week, I think Thursday.
Yes.
We've had a few pieces on American cricket over the years in Wisden Cricket Monthly and back in All Out Cricket as well, and I've never really been convinced by the thing that is actually going to happen. It's more a kind of like, hope than expectation that cricket might take off in the States. This feels different, largely because of the money behind it, IPL money, the fact that it's a T20 franchise. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, this does feel like a very important event. I see a press release coming through saying the first game is a sellout in Texas. This could be the start of something quite big. Quite a few big names out there. I think du Plessis is going up against Narayan in the first game as the two opposing captains. So big players. Nicholas has done a really good job on that. All the county files, 18 stories on 18 counties as usual. Phil, you spoke to Catherine Sciver-Brunt about her riotous career.
I did. The most potty-mouthed interview I've done, I'd say. From
on
both sides. From both sides,
okay.
Especially from hers. But what a story, what a woman.
And I, in my Procreation series, I speak to Daryl Mitchell and his dad, John, former All Black coach as well, about his journey in the game and latterly his transformation from this kind of bits and pieces all-rounder to one of the leading batters in the world. And we finish off with Dimi Mascarenas talking about the teammate that changed his life, which was Shane Warne, and his influence at Hampshire, which is both funny and touching. So I would recommend all those things. Available from... Have you got more stuff to recommend, Phil?
It's just somewhere in it as well. We try and ask the question about what the ICC actually does.
Oh, yeah.
Just over about 8 or 10 pages, right in the guts of the magazine that I spent a number of days trying to pull together. Ben was especially good on that, and Katya explosively in form. Some of that is well worth reading.
Yeah, that's been something we've been trying to do for a few months, and it's been quite tricky to pull together. But I think it's been done really well. Yeah, and as Phil says, Ben and Katya's writing is brilliant on a variety of subjects.
It was got in characteristically so late that I think Joe forgot that it actually exists, but it is in there. pending a balls up at the Princes.
As always, you can get the latest magazine at wisden.com/shop. Just before we finish, I thought I'd mention that on the weekend I took 2 for 26 off 10 overs. But second wicket was stumped, keeper standing back. Batter kind of walks out his crease, last ball of the over, keeper takes stumps down. We appeal there. The square leg umpire, who's one of their players, gives it out. No one complains.
Interesting.
No one complains. And I'm obviously...
You didn't consider withdrawing the appeal?
Not at all. I was doing laps.
Yeah, sure. Well,
shirt over your head.
Dogfight, of course.
Yeah.
All right. As we're doing, I did a Q&A at a state school in West London around Richmond, Twickenham area, but a kind of a tougher, rougher area of that place. A school called Heathfield Primary School, and their cricket setup is extraordinarily great. And it all comes down to a bloke called James Watson, who's like a visionary, really. And I mentioned him in the article I did a few months ago, and they asked me to go along to help do a Q&A. Zafar Ansari was there, Aaron Haranath, and Donna Fraser, the great Olympian runner, she was there as well. And it was just heartening to see that even though cricket in state schools is on its knees and has been shamefully ignored, if you have individuals who have the gumption and selflessness and vision to pull something together, then you can do great stuff. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Watson, one of your own.
Anyway, that is all we have time for today. Thank you, Phil, Joe, Ben. This has been the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. We'll be back after a little bit of a break next week.
Hi, I'm Kumar Sangakkara, and I'm speaking to you from the Kia Oval. Hello to all parents of young cricket fans. If you are 11 to 16 years old, or if you are a parent of an 11 to 16-year-old, then this message is for you. As part of the partnership between Surrey County Cricket Club and Kia, this amazing opportunity has been created to motivate and excite you, cricket's next generation. This is your chance as a young cricketer to play here on the hallowed green of the Kia Oval, where I spent some great years playing for Surrey in the sport that I love so much. You could be here at a coaching session with me on Saturday, September the 23rd, before playing out there on the field, courtesy of Kia, who have sponsored this club and ground for over a decade. Cricket has been a huge part of my life since I was a little boy, from the age of about 11 or 12, and I know what an opportunity like this would have meant to me. If you want the chance to be part of this, all you need to do is apply, and we might see each other in September.